Good morning. Today's February the 5th, 2023. I'm just going to be on here quickly, mostly for posterity. This morning I ran into some technical troubles, and so wasn't able to send out this morning's email until after the start time of today's seminar. Which is unacceptable timing, obviously, for letting anyone who wanted to attend or participate know about today's seminar. Unfortunately, while I'm on my computer today, I've got things set up to email to a list of people and et cetera, to let you guys know about the seminar. Those of you who opted to be on such a list and et cetera. And unfortunately, while I was managing the list, something happened, and my email manager either deleted the list or it became corrupted. I'm not entirely sure what happened. And anyways, the way it works is, you kind of have your form email or whatever, and then it sends it to everybody on the list. So without the list, that makes that process a little bit more difficult. So that happened about 20 minutes before this seminar is set to start. And I don't know how it happened anyways. So I went looking to try to find, like the undo button, for lack of a better word. Of course, not that simple. Tried to find if there's like a backup or something, or if I could see like an old email and like get the list out of it. Or anyways, I was not able to save the list. I know that I still have all the emails. That much I do know. I could recreate the list for sure. But I wasn't able to find the list. And I did, in fact, end up having to essentially go get the individual email accounts listed in a previously sent email, like in my email, and then add them manually to today's email, missive, whatever you want to call it, right? So because that happened, I wasn't able to send out today. Okay, that's weird. Okay, sorry. I wasn't able to get today's reminder out on time because for whatever reason that list got corrupted. So I'm going to work on getting the list back for next week. So hopefully that will work properly and everything will be back on schedule. I'm not entirely sure, like I said, what happened there. I just know that the list was deleted or corrupted or whatever, and it caused a whole bunch of problems on the computer this morning. If you hear me just reacting there, my screen popped up and said I have an hour for this Google Meet. It makes sense to me because I literally pay them for Google Meet Premium or whatever the heck you call it. So I gotta. Am I logged into the wrong account? I'm not too sure why that is structured the way that it's structured. So, anyways, this week, before I get to talk about any real estate, just to give you a heads up, I've been sick all week, so my voice might be a little off. Probably, I'm feeling a lot better, so I probably sound pretty normal, but I am quite congested. I can still feel it in my face, and I may have to pause to cough once or twice. So bear with me. Pardon me. This week, I was hoping to talk about, you know what, it's not directly I guess, real estate investing. At least certainly it's not fundamental or anything like that. But I wanted to talk about I want to talk about scalability. Scalability is a term you've probably heard. If you haven't, it refers to the ability to take something from 1 to 100 to 1,000, right? To scale it. Scalability, I think, is first of all, it's a very important concept for business, right? If you can sell a person an apple for $1, that's one thing. If you can sell 1,000 people a dollar, oh my gosh, an apple for $1, that's a different thing, right? One is like a hobbyist at a farmer's market, and another is like a grocery store, right? So one's a business. Scale and scalability are one of the things that are a business, right? If you can do a transaction, then that's cool. But if you can do that transaction many, many, many times, that's a business. So scale and scalability is this very important concept, especially to a business. The idea being kind of that if there's a product or service that you can provide to your customer, right? Can you bring people in or systems or tools to provide that same product or service to more and more people, right? And the idea behind scalability is that as you scale, right, there are certain advantages, synergies, duplications that occur, right, that make it more advantageous for you to operate at scale than it does for you to operate, on a one-off, right? So I'm going to give you an example, a real estate example. Your first ever real estate deal. You've never done a real estate deal. You probably don't know any realtors, certainly not in a working relationship, right? You won't maybe know any appraisers, you won't know any home inspectors, you won't know any financing professionals, you won't know any other real estate investors necessarily from which to prospect or potentially buy their portfolio from. Now, as you start investing, you do that first deal, you meet a realtor, you meet a real estate lawyer, you meet an appraiser, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them you like, some of them you don't, some of them you work with. Obviously, that's just the nature of relationships. But assuming that, you can build working relationships with these people, now the next time you go to buy a real estate deal, you could start by contacting the realtor, the real estate lawyer, the finance professional, rather than, floundering and looking for properties and this and that and the next thing, right? And then if we take that a step further, right, let's say you go from being, dabbling real estate investor to, let's say, a flipper, right? That flipper may have advanced the relationship with the realtor to the point where that realtor brings them pocket listings and deals that they know they probably can't sell to anybody else, but they can sell to you, the flipper, because they know what your criteria is, right? And so you can kind of scale up your business with their help, right? Scalability, right? Where a task, let's say searching for a property, which initially took up, 5 hours a week, whatever it was when you were first starting out and you didn't know anything, you can scale to the point where I'm buying enough properties where actually the realtor will find the properties for me, or maybe I've now met and networked with a series of wholesaling professionals who they are finding and marketing properties to me, to the point where my business gets big enough in terms of dollar value, right, that I now am not the only individual who's invested in the outcome. And so that's scalability. Now, scalability comes in other ways as well, right? If you're a real estate investor and you're starting out and you're buying your first real estate property, maybe you buy, I don't know, a condo, you're going to rent out to somebody, right? And every month you spend, 2 hours sat down, right, reviewing your bills, paying off your expenses, making sure rent was collected, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And that's 2 hours a month you spend taking care of your one property. Now, whatever, 6 months pass, a year passes, 10 years pass, whatever your timeline is, you go and you get a second property, right? Well, now you don't spend 4 hours, right, doing the numbers for the two properties, right, paying the bills and covering the expenses and checking the rent. For the second property, maybe tax on an extra 10, 20 minutes, because really that 2 hours that you were taking for the first property is like, 30 minutes to get set up and a half an hour of dilly-dallying and having coffee and doing the slow things and whatever, right? So now you can scale because you can stack up these tasks of, looking after one property, two property, three properties, seven property, 10 properties, right? And so there's a scalability there, right? And you'll hear, I can't speak to this personally, but you'll hear from some of the bigger, more successful real estate investors who are managing, 100 to hundreds of properties, right? Now there is yet another scale factor there, because eventually you maybe stop spending that hour altogether, and now you have some sort of accounting professional who's doing all of that for you, right? And then your job is just administering that they're doing their job correctly. Right, so that's yet another level of scale, right? When you've gotten to the scale where you can actually outsource that type of task. So scalability is something that you'll see in business everywhere, but in real estate especially, there's a lot of opportunities for scale, right? Another example, and this only applies to some real estate investors, but if you're the type of real estate investor who buys your properties on a geographic basis, that is, maybe you invest in the same neighborhood, something like that, right? And you end up with, let's say, 10 properties in the same neighborhood. Well, then when you go to negotiate your snow removal contract, right, then that snow removal professional, now you're providing them with scalability, right, or volume in this case, right? That's what they would call it. That's what you'd call the negotiation volume. You're going to ask for volume pricing or a volume discount, right? You're going to say, oh, well, I've got 10 houses, but they're all basically next to each other. So you don't have to drive very far to salt or to plow or to anything. So whatever your regular rate is, you're going to give me a 20% discount or a 15% discount, right? However your negotiations go, right? And so that's scalability on the other side, where instead of making the work easier necessarily, is making the work cheaper. This is being work that you pay for. And that's, of course, true of landscaping. If we go back to the example, of my flipping professional, right? If you're a flipper and you've got a crew and you're flipping, let's just say 6 properties a year, right? One every other month. And you've got this crew that you keep on full time and they're working for you, they're making $75,000, $80,000 a year flipping for you, right? Then it's really nothing for you to call the guy who's making $80,000 a year flipping for you and be like, hey, can you install a few outlets here, or can you replace this there, or can you whatever? I know today you were supposed to be at house A, but instead go to house B and do these things. He doesn't care, right? He doesn't care. The guy you're paying $80K to do that, he does not care. So now for you, because you've made it to a certain scale where you have this guy kind of on your staff, the marginal cost, if you will, right? That's the per unit of consumption cost of his labor drops, right? Whereas when you're not at scale, right? If you just have one property and you're hiring a contractor piecemeal, then he has a contract. And then when you ask him to do something outside of that contract, he's going to nickel and dime you for that thing, and you're going to pay extra money for it. So when you're not at scale, it could be very expensive to replace a wall outlet, right? It could be very expensive to replace some trim, et cetera, in one of your in your property, right? But when you have 10 properties and you always have somebody kind of working for you, then it may be possible. It's not always. It's going to depend on your relationships and your situation, but it may be possible then to leverage, right, that relationship and get those things done because of your scale for a lower price. So I'm sorry, there we go. So scale and scalability, very important concepts to a real estate investor. Again, to any investor really, but in real estate, it's quite easy to see how this concept applies. And it applies to other things as well, right? So lately I've been very focused on real estate wholesaling methods, right? And specifically, I've been thinking a lot about marketing. How do you get in front of a potential seller before a realtor does, before the market's had the opportunity to build up the price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so there's a scalability to this problem as well, right? When you're looking for opportunities, when you're prospecting, right? When you're starting out, if you're looking for one deal, right, then the cost to do that transaction is going to be very, very high, because any money you spend to make the deal happen only applies to that deal. If you're at scale, or if you're scaling, right, if you're looking to do a deal every couple of months, let's say, then now you can invest, but now you can invest some resources, right, into marketing or branding or mind share, right? Where that before, because you were only looking for one deal, it didn't make any sense to spend money telling the market who you were, because you were just looking for one deal. That's a massive waste. But now, if you're looking for recurring deals, well, there starts to be an ROI on letting the market know who you are, right? Whether that's traditional marketing, whether that is networking, right? Whatever it is, right? You wouldn't take the time, for example, to network with real estate professionals to just buy a starter home. People don't do that, right? Because it doesn't make sense. The investment of time into the relationships is not equivalent, to the value that you get from those relationships, right? But now when you're looking to scale, suddenly the value of that relationship can at times, usually not, but it can at times exceed the actual value of the transaction that you're doing, right? For some people, certain relationships are going to be much more valuable than the actual transaction or two that initiates the relationship, right? And so at scale, suddenly the things that you value change, and can change in some cases rather radically, right? And so scale is not just something that should be targeted, but it's something. Sorry, hold on. Let me rewind just a little bit. Okay. Scale is something that should be targeted for its many economic advantages, if you are ready and in a position to do that. Obviously, if you are looking to invest, in one property, if you are looking to, buy your first investment property, things like that, scale is something that you could think about and that is interesting, but it's more of an outline or more of a future concept for you, right? It's more aspirational than actually something you're going to attain right now, right? But it's something that I think is very good to think about, because first of all, it's fundamental, right? Once you see it, you can't not see it. It's the reason that Walmart and Amazon exist, because scale it just wins, right? There's economies of scale, which is like a whole in economic theory. We have economies of scale, which tells us that the larger the scale of our productive effort, right, then the lower per unit cost of that effort is going to tend to be, right? Which is why it is cheaper to make 1 billion widgets in a gigantic mega factory in China staffed by 25,000 people than it is to make that same number of widgets in 5 smaller factories across the American Midwest, right? And that's not just because Chinese laborers are cheaper. There's an actual economic advantage to just doing it all in one facility, which maybe is not possible in the American labor market or the Canadian labor market or whatever, etc. Right? So scale is valuable, it's beneficial, it's useful, and we see that in all sorts of places, right? Apple is the world's most profitable company, arguably. I guess it goes up and down, but I think they are on top right now. And what Apple managed to do, really, right, is Apple is And all of these tech companies they're scaling platforms. That's what they do, right? Apple managed to take HMV and put it in your pocket. They managed to scale the model of Virgin Records and HMV and these companies and say, hey, we can reach every person in their pocket, right? And then they also went to the Best Buy software section, said, we'll throw that in your pocket too. And then they went to the bookstore and they threw that in your pocket as well. And lately they've been going to the banks and throwing that in your pocket as well. And so you see they're the masters of scale. They look for ways to find what is a common problem that they can address for all of their consumers and then scale it in a way that is obviously wildly profitable. And it's profitable for a variety of reasons, right? And one of the things about scale is scale brings with it advantages that go beyond just monetary, right? I'll give you an example. If you're an investor, just regular investing, like we won't say specifically real estate or this or that, you invest in things, right? Okay. You start out with $10,000 when you're 18 years old, let's say idealistically, or really you start out with $10,000 when you're like 13, 14, whenever you start, doing your first job or whatever and saving some money. But we don't teach our kids very well in this society. You take your savings, right? And you're going to invest it. I don't know, you throw it in the stock market. We're going to bet on Apple, let's say, right? And so you do that for a few years, and every year you make a 7, 10, 12% return. 1 year you do really well, you get 15%. Anyways, 10 years go by or whatever, and you've grown your initial $10,000. It's now $275,000. And you know what? You make a series of more investments. You double it on some crazy cryptocurrency and whatever. Another 10 years go by, and now your $275,000 has become $1.25 million. Good job. 20 years, $1.25 million. That's like pretty average returns, really, at an average of 7%. And if you're saving aggressively, so that's a completely achievable thing. And it's what makes me sad about how we educate our children. Because again, if you got a 15-year-old to do that by the time they were 35, and I am way closer to 35 than I'd like to be, by the time they're 35, they'd be a millionaire, right? It's just we don't teach our children very well, so they don't know this. But now, let's say you got your $1.25 million, right? You started out with 10 grand, and you're picking individual stocks. Now you got $1.25 million. Now you can continue to pick individual stocks if you want, but you've scaled, and the world of investing and the government recognizes this now. I think that the way the investment system is set up is evil, right? If I want to risk my money, get out of my way and let me risk my money. The government really does not have the right to tell me I can't risk my money, but the rich guy over there can risk his money. Well, it doesn't make sense, but that's a whole nother conversation. Now that you've made it to this level, right, of attainment, you can now become recognized as an accredited investor, which is a way of saying that you are an investor who's at scale, who's at a certain scale that they feel like certain losses aren't going to devastate your life like they would for the poorest. And so therefore now you can invest in quote unquote riskier investments, which often happen to be equally as risky or less risky than those that are on offer to the public. And certainly a lot of them offer you a lot more control as an investor. So it's a very strange situation. But now you get access to those investments, and those investments, they'll pay you an average of, let's say, 12% per year versus the 7% you're getting in the stock market, right? And now you're accredited, you can get something called deal flow, right? Which is where the deals start coming to you. So rather than you having to go look for opportunities to invest your money, now investments for your money are coming to you looking for money. So you could just sit back and pick the investments that you want. And so you can take your portfolio and now you could scale it substantially faster in the second 20 years than you did in the first 20 years, because now you are leveraging scale, right? Now, obviously, people don't want to wait for 20 years, and I understand this. Unfortunately, you don't have to, right? Scale can occur overnight. You can go from, $1 million business to a $20 million business in the span of a couple of years, right? In the span of a year, if the business is good enough and if you're working hard enough, right? So scale is something that is achievable. and it is achievable in a relatively quick time frame, but it is going to enable you as an individual. It enables all sorts of things, including access to opportunities you didn't have before. One of my favorite real estate investing strategies that I learned about, I refer to it as laddering. I don't remember when I learned it, I don't remember what it was referred to as, but I'm going to refer to it as laddering. That might have been what they called it as well. I don't know. It's just what makes sense to me. But laddering, fantastic investing technique. You do it with a couple different types of investments, but the one that I'm going to focus on is called a development deal, right? And laddering, basically the way that it works is you're going to do a development deal. So development deal, so you understand, is a developer is building a condominium. It doesn't need to be a condominium, but typically they're building a condominium. And in order to do that, the way condominiums work, right, is the developer is going to put up the money for the land, right? They're going to put up the money for the development costs. Then they need to, according to Canadian law, they need to sell 75% of the units, and then they can start building the condominium. Okay. Now, the way this works in practice is the developer is going to put up the money for the land and buy it, right? And usually they will work with a bank and they will say to the bank, hey, we're developing this property. We need a mortgage. And the mortgage needs to be for the value of this land plus the value of the construction that we're going to build on the land. And the lender will say, okay, you're going to register this as a condo. You're going to sell it as this. And there's all these regulations and hoops you got to jump through. But the lender will eventually say, okay, yeah, we will lend you that money, but you've got to bring X amount down, right? And that X amount down, I mean, when we're talking about a $250 million condominium, is going to be $50 million or so, right? And so that money has to come from somewhere. That money has to exist before we've sold the condos, right? Before we've bought the land, before we do anything, we need to get that money. So that money, that's the development deal. That's where the developer will go. And now they'll come to investors, essentially, and say, hey, will you give us money to build this condo? It's going to take X number of years. Usually it's 5 to go from financing to condos are sold. And then we'll pay you back at plus, of course, profit. So development deals are a little bit risky, right? Anybody will tell you, development deals are risky because condo cannot get built, which is true. That's a thing that can happen, right? So you got to worry about that. But most condos do get built. It depends. Obviously, if you're buying some sketchy condo in some sketchy place, then, you might get burnt. If you're buying that high-end super luxury condo that everybody's been talking about, chances are it's going to get built. There may be setbacks and things of that nature, but just, right, so we all understand the risks that are involved, right? And so these deals, they tend to be higher yield deals. They might pay 20% per year on average return, 5 years, 100% return, right? Something like that. Some of them will pay 25, some of them will pay 17, in and around that range. I actually haven't looked at a deal in at least a year, a development deal. So they might be paying more right now because of the interest rates. I'm not too sure. But that's all right. That's around what they pay, right? And it's totally passive. The developer's going to build the property. You don't do anything. You just sit there and wait for your money. That's it. Very passive deal. Okay. The laddering comes in, and it's a scale thing, right? Because you can just do a development deal. It's a development deal. You give them $100,000. You wait 5 years. They give you back $200,000. Development deal, right? The comes in where what people will do is in their retirement, they'll buy a development deal. Let's say they want a standard of living that costs $100,000 a year. So what they'll do is they'll go, and it's usually on a schedule. So there's a couple of years involved. So I'm going to list the years. Year 1, they're going to buy a development deal, $100,000, 5-year term. So in 5 years, that deal should come mature, assuming everything was on schedule. And when it does, right, they're going to pull out $200,000, right, 20% per year. So that's what they do year 1. Year 2, they buy another development deal, again for $100,000, again for a 5-year term, again 20% per year. Okay. And so this is where the ladder starts, right? You have rungs on the ladder. So each year they keep doing the same thing. Another $100,000, another 20% per year, another 5-year term. At the end of 5 years, their first deal has come to term, right? And they've put in $500,000 1 year at a time, $100,000 a year, 5 years, right? And so now the first year comes due. they receive $200,000, right? Now they could take that $100,000, they want a $100,000 lifestyle, and they can live off it, which is not quite how the math works out because there are taxes and stuff. But most of that they get to keep because it's investment income. It's not T4 income, so it's taxed favorably, and they get to keep most of that money and live off it, buy, sell, whatever. They get the other half of it, right? Because they got $200,000 back. They take that other half. They buy another $100,000 at 20%, right, to maintain that lifestyle. And so now they start rolling. And so now year 6, they get back $200,000, reinvest $100,000. Year 7, they get back $200,000, reinvest $100,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as long as you're not worried about inflation, you can just do that basically forever until you have a bad deal where you don't make your money back, right? And so that's laddering, and it's a type of scale. And what's interesting about that is it's scale in 2 different ways, right? First, you have to be an accredited investor to do those types of deals, which means that you have to have already accrued hundreds of thousands of dollars of assets to get accredited. So you have a scale there in terms of a dollar value scale. The second scale is obviously I'm buying multiple development deals over and over and often enough to create cash flow. It's like a quasi deal flow into a cash flow situation where now I have turned what is a one-time event, right? This one-time development deal. I've now turned that into a repeating event and a cash flowing event so that I now have predictable income in my life by scaling it, right? By doing it multiple times over and over again. And so that is a way in which things can become very, very, very profitable and or convenient for you, the investor, by working at scale, right? I was talking earlier about how I've been thinking a lot about marketing and trying to get in front of potential sellers, right? And how at scale, it makes sense now to have some market awareness and to maybe incur some of the marketing costs, right? So when you're scaling, you can focus on longer term benefits, right, than when you're just doing a one-off deal, right? And so that allows you to invest in your ability to do the deal, your ability to follow through, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To go back to my example of the flipper, his investment, right? He's invested in his team. And because he's invested in his team or her team, whatever, because they're invested in their team, that person now has access to labor in the form of the people on their team that they may be able to get at a discounted rate compared to the general public, right? Because again, if I've got a contractor, I'm paying $80,000 a year. I'm paying him $80,000 a year. It doesn't matter whether he's working on my house, whether he's working on my tenant's house, whether he's working on my neighbor's house. As long as he's getting paid his $80,000, as long as he's working his 40 hours a week or whatever, right? That's been agreed to. Then, I mean, within reason, he's good to go. He's happy, right? And so, again, I might be able to get that guy in a house for, $50 to do some minor repairs, where if I wasn't working at that scale with them, a contractor might charge me $400 to show up and do that same exact job, right? And so now I can, because I have scale, I can actually address problems and profitably, right, that could not be addressed by the non-scaled investor, right? And that's the same thing if we go back to my marketing, right? I, as a buyer for one property, cannot do the things that Sam McDaddy can do. We all know who Sam McDaddy is. If you don't know who Sam McDaddy is, then you're probably not in the GTA. Sam McDaddy is I don't know if he still is this year, but he certainly was last year, the highest grossing realtor in the Greater Toronto Area, West End. I believe that's his claim to fame. So in the West, and I don't know if the East End is different. Maybe he's the highest grossing across the GTA. I'm not sure, but certainly in the West End, right? He's killing it, and everybody knows who he is. You see his slimy face everywhere, and I say slimy. I mean, I'm sure he's a very nice gentleman. It's just you can see the plastic surgery a little bit. He got a little overzealous trying to look his best, but you You see his picture everywhere. Everybody knows who he is, right? Because it makes sense for him. He's at scale, right? He's selling 100 houses a year or whatever. I actually don't know what the number is, what the volume is. Probably more than that, actually. Houses a year. And so for him, it's valuable and it makes sense for everybody to know who he is. And so if he spends, $500,000 putting his face on buses and billboards and stuff, it's going to come back to him because he's going to do way more than $500,000 in sales off of that, right? And similarly, obviously not Sam McDaddy, not that approach. You as an investor, you're not a realtor, so you don't need the kind of publicity and profile that Sam McDaddy had. But all the same, right, there's a certain value in you being out there and certainly in people knowing that, ABC home buyers are active in their neighborhood, right? To be getting letters, flyers, et cetera, whatever, bandit signs, whatever it is, right? A bandit sign is another perfect example of scale, right? If you're looking to buy one house, you don't put up bandit signs. It doesn't make any sense. Who's going to spend $1,000 to print out all these signs and then however many hours it takes to go out and hammer them into the lawn and whatever else you got to do, right? To buy one house, you're not going to do it, right? But if you're planning on buying 10 houses this year, and it's going to cost you, let's say it's going to cost you $1,000 to print the signs and then another $1,000 to put all the signs up because you're going to pay somebody to go hammer them because you don't want to be out there in the winter doing that. So $2,000 to deploy these signs. Well, again, as an individual, you would never do that. But if you're planning to buy 10 houses that year, it's $100 a house. Who cares? Like, who cares at all? It's not even a consideration, right? Like, you're going to make that up on closing on one single house. Right? And so that's one thing that needs to be understood as well, right? Is there are a lot of expenses that you can wrap up in that first deal if you know that there are 3 more behind it, right? And so developing that pipeline and having that scale is going to allow you to focus on those things that are, again, a little bit more long-term, right? Because I think everybody can get caught up in the shorter term stuff, right? Either whether that's profit, right? Just I want to see a return on my investment and I want to see it right now, which obviously everybody wants to see that, of course, but also, sometimes either these things take time or really you're going to see the profit you're going to see based on the effort that you put into it. And part of that effort is how much are you invested, not just in this property, but in the overall process, the overall identity, the overall, et cetera, right? That's really going to have an impact on your market share, your mind share, and then how many opportunities that you have to knock down. So, man, my nose. Working at scale, right, obviously allows you to have opportunities and to pursue opportunities that maybe aren't available when you're not working at scale, right? And those investments, then that allows you to make investments that can pay off in the future that you could not make when it's a one-off or, it's your second deal, and you're not doing too much, right? So that's something to keep in mind, right? Always be thinking about if and when there's going to be a next deal, right? If you're working with a professional, is this person potentially going to be a part of that next deal, right? And how can I grow or maintain this relationship to scale, right? Now, I think a lot of people need to be careful because there's a lot of people in this world who will sell you the promise of tomorrow, for lack of a better, I'm not sure exactly how to put it, right? But like, there's a lot of people who will sell you, you can, it's very prevalent in the whole self-improvement, personal development, financial improvement industry. You could be a millionaire, you could be this, you be that, whatever. I'm going to sell you on your future. Give me $20,000 to transform you, kind of thing. And I'm not saying you can't be those things, and I'm not saying that they can't transform you. I don't know. right? I do believe that a lot more people probably pay $20,000 to see Tony Robbins than end up finding that $20,000 to be a valuable investment, because the dude gets tens of thousands of people to go see him. But I don't know. When you do the math on the world, I think there's like 35 million people who have more than $30 million. So they're considered like super high net worth individuals, something like that. And then when you think about it like that, it's like, oh, wait, so there's a country the size of Canada basically full of people who have $30 million. It's like, okay, I guess, the tens of thousands of people who go see Tony Robbins could all be very high achievers and they're all getting their money's worth. I still suspect they aren't, because I've met lots of people who weren't rich but have gone to see Tony Robbins. So, and I'm not trying to knock Tony Robbins. I actually think he's awesome. But I'm just saying, there's a lot of people out there who will sell you on the future, right? And you have to be careful of that, especially if you're working with people like real estate professionals, stuff like that. Oh, well, yeah, you pay a little bit more for the house now, but then we'll work together in the future, kind of a thing. And I think especially for real estate professionals, most of those relationships are going to be transactional. It's just the nature of the business. Sometimes you will there's kind of two types of real estate professionals who might stick around and you might have scalability with. One is somebody like Sam McDaddy, those go-getters who are going to scale on their own. They may get to a scale where it's just valuable to know them. And, I'm sure whoever met Sam McDaddy 20, 25 years ago, whenever it was that he was starting out, and, kind of befriended him and started getting pocket deals from him, I bet you they've done really, really well, right? That would be my guess. But again, most realtors are not going to be like that. But those are the ones you're really going to want to scale with, most likely. The others are, you might find realtors who, for whatever reason, either their chosen niche or maybe their geographic area or whatever, they're just going to specialize in what you are specializing in. There's like a lot of overlap between you. You're just kind of aligned. And, if they've got the right attitude and everything, then they might be a great scaling partner as well. But I mean, in general, I wouldn't emphasize discounting a deal in pursuit of future deals with most of these people, because chances are these are going to be transactional relationships. The scale I'm mostly talking about is not actually the like personal relational scaling, although that's very valuable and important. And certainly in my example of the flipper, that is the thing that's scaling, and that's where the scaling should be focused on. I think for your average investor, the places where the scaling is really going to be noticeable, for starters, systems, right? I mentioned if you're sitting down monthly, tracking your finances, paying your bills, et cetera, the more properties you add, it doesn't add more work. I mean, it does add more work, but it adds substantially less, right? So that's one place where you're going to see. Sorry, I'm having trouble here with the. That's one place where you're going to see scale come into play. And then the other would be like your business processes and practices. Are you advertising? Are you marketing? Are you trolling the Bigger Pockets forums, or hitting up Matt McKeever's audience in his comments, or whatever, right? Doing those things, to get your name out there, to get et cetera. So try to find ways to work at scale in everything that you do, at least for your business, your investments, right? Your marketing, even your networking. Can you network at scale? And it's not something I figured out, but I know there are people out there who have and who do this. I remember listening to this one guy. He had a great plan for it. It was his way to network at scale. And I'm going to leave here because I'm having trouble talking. So this will be the end of the seminar. But he was saying that, it's easy to learn anything. This is his thesis. It's easy to learn anything. It's just that most people aren't interested in doing what it takes to learn something. He said, so I want to learn about psychology. So I went on to Google and I Googled who are the 3 top psychologists in my city. I happen to live in Toronto. Toronto has excellent pretty much everything. So if there's a type of professional you want to find here, I'm sure that you could, and they'll probably be top notch. Anyways, he wanted to find psychologists. He wanted to learn everything he could about psychology, about human behavior. He wanted to learn about human behavior as it related to sales specifically. So he Googles, who are these 3 top psych professionals? And he finds the names. And then he got their contact information. So he emailed them a nice introduction. He says, hey, I'm so-and-so. And I understand that you are the top of your field. And I was hoping that I could learn from you. I've looked up what, the average annual salary for someone in your position is, and it's this amount. And I would like to pay you approximately 1 month's salary if you'll sit down with me for a day or two in the coming months, and we can talk about what you know. And maybe we can email a little bit, and I can tell you exactly what I'm interested in, so you'll know, what it is I want to talk about. And then we can sit down and have this conversation. You tell me what you know. And he said, you send that email out, and not everybody's interested, but in his case, he was able to hear back from, who was one of the best, like I said, in his city. And they said, sure, no problem. I'll sit down. It's a woman. It was a woman in his case. And he said, okay, cool. You know what, whatever, your schedule's busy, give you 2-3 months. We'll go sit down in 3 months' time. Right. And she says, she was so shocked because whatever, she makes, let's say, $120,000 a year. So he offered her $10,000, right, for a day of her time. And she's so stunned by this because think about who this person is. She's like a professor. She probably knows nothing about money. So she's like, oh my God, somebody's offering me $10,000. What a huge amount of money. So she's good, ready to take it. And so she's reaching back to him and saying, hey, I give you 2 or 3 days of my time. I mean, that's a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. And he says, no, listen, I respect your time. I appreciate you. I'm going to pay you that amount just for the 1 day. That's fine. Just teach me everything that you can. And so he said that when she showed up to her meeting, she had spent the 3 months leading up to their meeting preparing her entire life's work into binders and organizing it so that she would be prepared to deliver her life's work to this man who she didn't know, and he just wanted to learn. And so he basically learned what one of the leading researchers in her field knew about psychology in a single day, by paying that money. And you can do that, right? You can do it with a research professional, but you can do it with a real estate professional. You can do it with a stock professional, with a law professional, with whatever. I mean, the cost is money, right? How committed are you? If you want to, you could go spend money. It's making me think maybe I should go find a marketing professional, whatever, and learn from them, right? And I'm like, we don't. But that would be a way to network at scale, right? Where you stop making it about your time and you make it about something else, something that you actually can scale, because we can never scale time. That's always the problem. That's what scaling is all about. You can't make more hours in a day, but you can hire more people, right? You can use money to get more. So that's what scaling is. So think about ways in which you can multiply your efforts. Obviously not with time, right? Time is limited, but with people and with money. And understand that people equals money and money equals people, right? Another example, and then I'm going to go, personal trainer. Lots of people go to the gym. Lots of people go to the gym. Only so many people are really, truly fit, though, right? And one thing that you'll notice is that the people who are truly fit, and when I say truly fit, I mean like Hugh Jackman when he's the Wolverine. And I understand there's steroids involved, but I'm just saying, right? These are people who are like in really great shape. Arnold Schwarzenegger, anybody who you might look at and admire their physique, whether it's LeBron James or it's The Rock or Kylian Mbappe, whomever it is, right? These people who are in just phenomenal, incredible shape, right? Almost all of them have coaches or trainers, right? So they're leveraging somebody else. That's scale again, right? I can afford LeBron James, for example. Everywhere he travels, his personal chef comes with him. So he doesn't cook. but his personal chef will cook him what he needs to be as healthy as he can be, to be LeBron James, wherever he goes, right? That's scaling, right? He was like, hey, I'm a basketball player, blah, 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 blah. I can afford this, so he does. And it makes him better. Same with a personal trainer. He has a personal trainer. He probably has a couple. He probably has like a strength trainer and a flexibility trainer and a blah, 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 blah. But he has trainers, right? Keep you on track, to keep you accountable to scalability, right? It's now if I spend 2 hours a day thinking about my physique, that's 14 hours a week. But if I hire somebody to now spend another hour, now I've turned 14 hours a week into 21 hours of attention and thought and focus on my physique, right? So that's another type of scaling. So scaling is available to us everywhere. It's all around us. The opportunity for it is everywhere. And a lot of it comes down to how creative can you be in using your money and your relationships with people to achieve scale. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for your time. I can literally feel my face like it's been a rough week. But anyways, thank you for those of you who've joined me live. I always appreciate the support. I hope you got something out of today's seminar. I'm hoping next week will be a little more regular. I will get things done more on time and more in the usual rhythm, if you will. But a little bumpy this week. And of course, hopefully I'll see you all soon. If anybody has any questions, concerns, comments, you need help with anything, you know where to reach me, and you know that I would love to help. And I hope to speak to you all soon. Ciao.